Okay, so here we go. We're gonna go ahead and assemble our Stardust spinning luminary. Now this project does require some non-paper electrical items, okay? So check out the supply list and just make sure that you've got all of the necessary non-paper goods. Now this is a mason jar lamp kit that we purchased on Amazon. This came in a pack of 3. If you don't want to buy 3, I believe you'll have to buy 2 from National Art Craft, and we have a link to that. Now before you start doing anything with this, plug it in, put a light bulb in there, and just make sure that it turns on so that you don't glue it into place and then it turns out that this piece is defective. But just make sure that it's nice and tight and that it's not wobbling around, because we need to make sure that everything is nice and tight before the lampshade's going to spin for us. So this is what we're going to work on first, actually. There's nothing we need to do here, but we are going to be using this piece here in just a minute. Now, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grab the harp. Okay, now I'm just going to pop the lamp or the bulb into the lamp base here. And you don't want to use anything more than a 60-watt light bulb. And that's just for safety reasons. This is enough heat to propel the lantern, but not more than would make this unsafe. I actually had this lantern running for 3 days straight, and you know, the paper did get warm, but not hot to the touch and nowhere near what I would consider a flash point where it would start it on fire. So what we want to do first is you want to grab your harp, okay? Now some harps, depending on how they're manufactured, they will be nice and flat here, okay? Yours may be flat, it may not be flat, but it doesn't matter. If it's not flat, we can add a little bit of a shim using the Fahrenheit, PC Fahrenheit putty. Now this is an epoxy putty that is going to fuse not only the metal aspects of this project, but also the paper and metal aspects of this project. So the first thing we're going to do is you want to look through your push pins and just kind of rotate them in your hand and find one that has a nice straight point. Okay, now all of them may be a little bit bent, and if you need to, you can always take and kind of bend them to where they are a little more straight, okay? Because if you want your lamp to spin more consistently, the axis does need to be pretty vertical, okay? So all I'm doing is just kind of pushing this and bending it to try to get it as straight as possible. Now this one looks pretty good. Now keep in mind that when we glue this to the top of the harp can actually swivel a little bit. You don't want it to swivel too much, because then the lampshade will be thrown off center as far as where it is in respect to the base. But again, this is a DIY project. This isn't something that is perfectly machined by some multi-million-dollar company. So keep in mind that we're doing our best here to get the best possible result. And I know for a fact you're going to be able to make this thing, and it's going to spin, and it's going to be beautiful. So just do your best to try to get the best possible pieces and just follow along here. So we're going to go ahead and assemble the harp first. So again, it's just this harp and a push pin. I'm going to get rid of these other ones here. We don't need those. Okay. Now this is the epoxy putty. I'm going to just peel away a little bit of this surrounding plastic, and you can grab a knife or some scissors, and we're going to need this for about 2 or 3 parts of the assembly. So I'm going to cut off a decent chunk here, and if I need more, then I'll get more. I'm just cutting off about that much, and you can see it almost looks like a little Debbie Hostess cake or something, where it's got a cream filling. Well, these pieces, these elements are separated because when you kind of smush them together in your hand, it begins a chemical reaction that actually will start to harden and strengthen these 2 compounds. Okay, so you just need to blend these as best as you can in your hand. You can wear gloves if you'd like. There's another element to this process that is going to require, well, it's not going to require, but it's probably recommended that you use some gloves because it can get a little messy. And so what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to just kind of knead this until I've got a good mixture. And it is kind of, it's got a bit of a sulfury smell to it. So if you're sensitive to that, just beware. You might want to just put a fan on or something to vent away some of the smell. It doesn't seem to bother me too much. But the epoxies and the spray glues really get to me for some reason. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of let that start to bond, okay? And what we're going to do is I'm going to take my lamp base, put my harp on, and just try to eyeball that. Look, put your head above it and try to center it as best as you can. Maybe close one eye and just try to center it as best as you can. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of this and we're going to take our push pin and just start basically molding it to the top of the harp. Okay, now this isn't rocket science, and there's, you know, it's not like a, I don't know, it's kind of like ceramics almost, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it. Just do your best to get that initial hold on there. This stuff is going to turn rock solid. And actually, I'm going to just go ahead and tilt this a little bit. And then what you're going to want to do as you're molding this, get a little bit more of that putty towards the top of the pin. And just sculpt it as best as you can. And then as this stuff's going to take a little bit to dry and harden and cure, as they call it, do your best to get as much as you can around there, nice and even amount all the way around. And then once you've got a good amount of putty on there, again, from an overhead view, center the harp on the bulb, okay? And then also do your best to center that pin on there and push down. It should have a lot of resistance because you know you've got it right on top of that harp, okay? Now, if you guys find better ways to do this, by all means, feel free. But again, this PC putty that we have is it's heat resistant up to 500 degrees. The surface of a light bulb, from what we've researched, reaches about 350, maybe 400 at that. This stuff had no issue withstanding the heat of a 60-watt light bulb. So it's going to be nice and effective. It's going to hold everything in place, and it's going to be all good. Okay, so that is about how you want it. Now also just kind of take a look while it's still soft. Look off on from the side of it, and make any adjustments that you need to the actual push pin, and rotate it a few times, and also just make sure you get it as centered as possible so that it's like nice and vertical. It needs to be nice and vertical for this thing to spin beautifully. Okay, so to me that looks pretty good. Okay, again, I'm going to look top down, and that actually looks perfect. Okay, so I'm going to put this to the side for a minute and let that begin curing. Okay, so we can go ahead and begin putting together the actual lampshade itself. So it's made up of these pieces here. We've already put the front panels on. We've got the vellum on most of the pieces except for one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to put the vellum piece on here, and we'll do our best to get the glue on there. And just go ahead and glue that down. I went a little crazy on the glue there. Okay. And just let that dry. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and begin piecing these together side by side like so. So we've got tabs here. You want to go ahead and place your glue right along this tab and just kind of get it out to the edge. Get a nice clean bit of glue on there. Make sure everything is right side up. And just get that glued down. Make sure it's nice and even. You can even fold it over and kind of use this edge to make sure that you've got it all nice and lined up. Okay, we're going to take the next piece here and apply our glue. And Ron Gutman, our creative director, has kind of taught me some gluing tips. And yeah, you get a little bit of glue on your fingers, but you end up getting the glue out to the edge, and it really helps with a nice, firm, clean, beautiful, and even hold. And just fold this over again. Use your fingers to kind of adjust it while it's still wet. And just make sure it's got a nice solid hold. Okay. Now there's one panel here that I didn't put on, but I can go ahead and do that now. It's not the end of the world, but I'm just going to leave that off for now. It's not really vital. And then eventually what we're going to do, and you want to just go ahead and just get these folded so that they're sort of trained and learning how to exist. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put glue on this guy here. Try to get it out to the edge. Nice even bit of glue on there. You just lay that flat actually, because in that way you actually know that you've got everything perfectly symmetrical and lined up. Okay. Okay, so the next thing we're going to work on is the top of our lampshade. Okay, now this piece here, we're going to go ahead and fold these in like so. These are your little sails. Okay, these are what is actually going to help propel the lamp. You don't need to actually touch that right now, and actually I'd prefer that you not fold these just yet. We're going to leave these upside down just like so. Okay, and we've got these pieces here, and what we're going to do is these are going to get glued on. These are going to get glued on like so. Okay, but before we do that, we actually need to create our little pivot point. Okay, that's going to get sandwiched in between the paper. So we're going to grab a washer, and this is a 1/4 inch washer. I have the exact model and part number listed in the supply list on the website. And you're going to need one of these acorn nuts. Also have the exact part number listed on the website. We bought ours at Lowe's. Okay, and as you can see, this thing fits inside this washer perfectly. So it kind of will just hang in there, and it gives us a little bit more surface area for when we go to glue this. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to grab some more of our putty. Okay, you don't need too much. I'm just going to cut off a little bit. Just make sure that you get a good amount of the darker stuff and the lighter stuff, and just kind of knead that in your hand until we get, you know, the creamy filling mixed in with the chocolatey exterior. Now, it's not edible. I don't want you to, it's not a Tootsie Roll or anything. I'm just being silly here, but just kind of knead that out. So we're doing our best to get the two compounds mixed together, and that's looking pretty good. So what I'm going to go ahead and begin doing is I'm going to take a little chunk, okay, and I'm going to just go ahead and I've got my acorn nut facing down, so the hole is on the surface. I'm putting my washer on top, and I'm going to take the putty and begin just kind of forming it to the top, and just kind of, what you really want to do is just create a nice thin layer of the putty so that it covers the entire surface. And as you're doing that, you want to kind of, you want to just kind of smooth it out so that it's a real thin layer, because once we're done with this, we're actually going to sandwich it between these two pieces of paper. So as you're doing that, as you're kind of smoothing it out, you're going to get a little bit of excess that's going to come off the side, and then you can kind of keep pushing down until you've got just a really nice thin layer. Okay, now that to me looks pretty good. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually flip this over. I'm going to grab the rest of this stuff and also work my way around the bottom and get that in place too, so that not only does it hold from the top, but it's also going to hold from the bottom and keep these two pieces of metal from jostling around. We want them to form a nice tight bond. Okay, this doesn't have to be perfect, as long as we've got a little bit of sticky on top and a little bit of sticky on the bottom. This stuff actually does a really good job of bonding to the paper too, and it sets very quickly. Okay, so I'm just kind of kneading that down. You might need to adjust it a little bit here and there, but eventually it'll be nice and strong. So that's roughly what you want it to be like. You might want to kind of just get the excess off of your fingers. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just get a visual here. This is how it's going to get glued to the bottom of the top of the shade. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop this right in here. Okay, do your best to make sure that that dome is nice and centered. Okay, just kind of push that down. And then this piece is going to go right on top, just like that. And you can actually push down to really get that in there. Okay, so we're sandwiching it in there. And we just want to make sure that that putty is getting a grip on the paper as well. And that's looking pretty good. Try to make sure that that's nice and centered. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our regular glue, okay, and we're going to glue these two pieces together. Being a little careless here with my glue, but you're going to do a better job because you're going to be sitting. Okay. All right. So we've got that in place. We're going to let that dry. And then you can take, and as we were gluing that down, had a little bit of this putty kind of come out at the top. That excess putty you can actually go ahead and just kind of clear off and even mold just to make it look prettier. So that is roughly what that should look like. And then eventually, once this dries, give it a little bit to dry, we're going to go ahead and glue that to this piece here. Okay. Okay, so this is what this piece should look like. Okay. And the putty is going to get nice and hard for us. Okay. And just do your best to make sure that it's evenly distributed. Okay. And again, what we're going to do, just make sure that these tabs are pointing down like that. You want to make sure that you glue this into place properly. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to place glue on these parts here. Just make sure you don't get any on the actual flaps. Okay, and again, you want to make sure that the hole of this acorn washer is coming up this way. Okay, so we're just going to glue that down. Do your best to get everything lined, and then flip it over and just make sure that that acorn nut is showing through, and then just push down. Make sure everything's got a nice hold. Maybe just hold it, Get your hands on that whole thing. Just hold it down until it's got a good grip. Okay. Okay, so once we have that glue in there, just push down on this and just make sure that everything is nice and level in there, okay? And it looks good to me. So we're gonna go ahead and put this aside. This is really what drives this thing, okay? So we wanna let this cure, okay, so that acorn nut is in position and everything looks good. Okay, so we're gonna leave that alone until it's nice and hard. We'll put that off to the side for now. And at this point, what we can do is we can go ahead and assemble the bottom part of the lantern. Okay, it's basically the same as the top, except it doesn't have the little support mechanisms going through the center. We're just gonna go ahead and glue this piece to the other piece, and that's just gonna help reinforce that piece and make it sturdier. It's gonna help us keep the shape of the lantern at the bottom as well. The heat does tend to want to warp the paper as it warms up a little bit, but it's not too bad. So just make sure we get that glued into place. Okay, so we have the bottom part all assembled. What we can go ahead and do now is begin forming our lantern. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and flip this thing upside down, and this is gonna go inside here. So we just kind of finagle this thing in here. It's gonna help create the structure of our lamp, and you want it to be flush here and here all around. And what we're going to do is just begin by gluing one side of this at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue on this tab here and just get that into place and do your best to get that nice and flush. Okay, you can even put that down if you need to and just push down to make sure that it's got a good grip. Okay, flip it back over, and then I'm going to go over to the opposite side. Okay, just pull that tab down, get that glued into place. Again, just make sure that it's nice and flush. And once those two are in place, the rest of it will go together fairly easily. Get the glue there. Okay, and just work your way around. Okay, great. So we've got the bottom of it all in place, and that's gonna help form the top. Now, what we can go ahead and do, and I'm gonna grab the top piece and just kind of feel the putty. It's pretty hard now. It's been probably about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. This stuff does cure pretty quick. If you feel that it's okay to handle it, you can go ahead and begin the next step. And that's simply taking this piece, and just as we did with the bottom, we're gonna pop this in the top here and begin gluing one side here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just grab this flap and add a little bit of glue. Okay, and just glue that down. Just push and hold it. Went a little crazy on the glue there. Okay. Get that piece nice and into place. And I'm going to flip it to the other side. Bring this up. Fold that tab out. And glue that to the side. Just push and hold that until it's got a nice grip. Okay. There we go. And then you just work your way around the other flaps here. some glue on this tab. Get that glued into place. Make sure that it's nice and flush at the top. Okay. Go to the next one. Get that glued into place. I can't wait to design lampshades for all sorts of themes and occasions. These things are going to be so cool, and I bet that they're going to do very well at your craft fairs. Hopefully, the places that you guys exhibit provides electrical outlets, because you're going to need them to make them spin. Okay, so I'm on my last one here. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that's nice and tight. Okay, and there is our lamp. Okay, now once you have these all put together, you can go ahead and begin gluing the little clouds at the top here. Okay, so you just want to put some glue on here, and actually let me go ahead and show you that. So I'm just going to go ahead, put some glue right here. Okay, and you want the smaller little cloud to be up at the top. Do your best to get that aligned nice and perfect. Okay, so you're going to repeat that process. Now, what you want to do with these little vents, okay, is just kind of bend them and take them with your fingers and just kind of, you can grab a pen if you want to kind of get them bent like that. Okay, so we want to just kind of arc them and, you know, get a nice little flow going to them. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, great. There we go. Now, the next part of the process, this is probably the messiest part. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to be taking the metal part of this ballpoint pen and removing it, okay? Because we're going to place this on top of the push pin to give us a surface that is, well, that offers less resistance. It's you know, a very smooth surface that is going to allow this lamp to rotate beautifully. So what you need to do is you need to, if you have some pliers or something, you can go ahead and simply remove the pen part. Actually, you see what I just did there? I just popped it right out. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get a little bit of our putty, and what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this putty and put it inside, just a tiny little bit of it, inside of the tip of the pen that we removed from the actual pen earlier. And that's going to help this thing actually stay in place once we get it onto the pin head. Okay, so you may already have some putty made, and I'm just whipping up a fresh little batch here. Okay, so I'm just going to take a tiny little bit, tiny little bit, and just put it over this hole on the base of the pin. And actually what I did was I just kind of pushed some in there so that it's inside. And then I'm going to go ahead and slide that right over the pin head. Okay, and that's it. So just make sure that that is nice and on there as far as you can go, and give it about as much time as it needs to cure. Now technically it says that it cures in about an hour, but it's actually not too early to test this thing out. So what we're going to do is we're going to just pop this right on that acorn nut, and this thing should begin spinning for us once it warms up a little bit. So let's just see if we can go ahead and get it to rotate here. Let's give it a few seconds to find its center point, and it should begin rotating for us. So let's see what happens here. And there it goes. So it just takes a little bit of time for the heat to build up, okay? And that ball head is nice and round. There's nothing obstructing it. There's no goop or anything like that because we put the putty right inside of that pin head, okay? And it's, we put the putty right inside of the pen tip, and then we push that down, and when that cures, it's going to form a nice bond between the push pin and the pen, and then that pen tip goes right into that acorn nut and gives it a really nice round surface to balance and rotate on. And this thing should actually balance and rotate for hours and hours and hours. I've had mine spinning nonstop for about 3 days now with no issue. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this on and test it for about 30 minutes and make sure it doesn't stop. And you'll actually get to see this in a time lapse. I'm gonna leave this on just to make sure that it doesn't encounter any issues at all. And I'm looking at it from the side here. It doesn't look like the tip of the pen is moving at all, so it's still gonna cure. And we'll just leave this go for a little bit and see if it will maintain its spin. Okay guys, so as you saw from the time lapse that we just sped up by probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, or 10 times. I don't know the exact number. This thing, since I put it on, is still spinning. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove the top of it, and I'm just kind of lightly twisting this, and I can see that pen tip is cured, and it's sitting on there nicely. Okay, so the electrical and the pivotal part of this is done. So we can actually move this aside. Now, you do want to put the rest of these on here. Okay, you're just gonna glue them like that. Okay, if you look here, this right here, there's a little edge there. You just wanna make sure that's nice and lined up and flush with this. So just get that piece on there. And the first thing you're gonna wanna do is just glue your panels on these side pieces here. Now this last panel, you don't wanna put on right away. Okay, that's gonna go on last after you're done feeding everything through. Okay, so the way that this goes together is you've got these two pieces here. These are gonna go on top. These are gonna get glued together just for some reinforcement. And you'll notice that this is like this. Okay, that's just so that we can slide the lamp in there. And then this piece is going to get glued on there once everything's in place. But let's go ahead and begin with the construction of the base of this first. Now, there's two pieces like this, and one of them actually has a circular score line on the actual piece here. You'll see it here, and that is to help you center this piece, okay? So first thing we're gonna do is we're going to assemble this piece here and just form the wall of the base of our lantern. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put some glue on this piece here. And you know what, let me grab a fresh piece of paper here real quick so we don't get anything messy or dirty. I'm just gonna go ahead and place that underneath. Okay, and we're gonna glue that down. Make sure it's nice and even. Okay, Got a little excess glue on there, that's okay. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and fold that over. Just make sure that I've got that nice and aligned. Scrape off any glue that might be coming out. Okay, so we've got that piece all put together. Flatten it back out again and just give it another extra second or two to dry. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get these folded over, and you may as well begin folding these tabs over a little bit just to kind of get them set. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and glue this together. Okay, so that's going to get glued just like that. And the reason I'm folding them like this is just because it helps you tell whether or not you've got everything nice and evenly and symmetrically together, because these should overlap perfectly if you know that you've got it exactly where it needs to be. Okay, so I'm just going to glue that down like so. Okay, so now that we've got the frame of the base in place, take a look at this little cutout piece here. You want to make sure that this slit is pointing down, okay? That this is the top, this is the bottom with the slit at the base there. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put this liner piece inside first, okay? So we're going to glue that down by putting glue on the tabs inside here. And it's going to help form the base more accurately for us for when we actually put the bottom down. Okay, so do your best to get the glue in there on those little tabs, and then we're going to pop that in. Okay, and when you're popping this in, just make sure that the score lines are visible. Okay, so we're just going to slide that in. Okay, and get that glued down real nice in there. Now we're going to flip this guy over, and we're going to take the bottom and we're going to fix that into place. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue on this tab here, on these tabs here I should say. Try to get them out to the edge as close as you can, and if you need to, maybe just smear a little bit along the edge there. Okay, and we're just going to actually, you want to fill this guy up here too. Okay, and texture side facing out. What we're going to do is we're going to take our cord, okay, we're going to feed it through. I'm going to feed it through here, and let's get this all the way through. And that is going to get glued right on the center of that circle there, okay. Now, what I actually prefer to use for this, again, is this putty material. Okay, so I'm just going to cut off some of that. And again, we're going to need this. Okay, and for each of these lamps, this is a 1 ounce container of the Fahrenheit or PC Fahrenheit moldable epoxy. And it looks like I'm using probably about 1/3 of it for each lamp that I create. So you figure you get one for about every 3 lamps that you're going to create. It should be actually more than enough. I think I might have overused or wasted some of it by grabbing too much for certain applications, because all we really needed the putty for was for this piece here and then this piece here. And if you're more careful and more systematic about it, more methodical, you could probably get away with using a lot less. So again, I'm just kneading this until I get both of those compounds mixed very well. Okay, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to just move this out of the way for just a minute. Okay, and what I'm going to do is just grab a few little pieces and just kind of mold them onto the paper along that circle. You don't need to do it all the way around, but try to get at least I don't know, 4 or 5 sides of the putty down so that we can just kind of squish it into place. Maybe, you know, maybe like 4 sides, and that should hold it pretty well. This stuff, literally, it turns into like steel when you're done with it. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. And I'm just gonna feed this wire through, do my best to get that nice and centered within that score mark, and then just push down on all sides here and make sure that it's got a good grip. Okay, and then you can take some of this excess putty off to the side and overlap it on the base of that little rim of the mason jar so that it really gets a good grip there. Okay, and kind of build a little wall up against the mason jar lid. Give that a second to dry. And now what we're gonna do is you're gonna take this piece, you're gonna slide it over, and it's gonna get glued down like so. And just wanna make sure that the switch is still accessible, which it is. So, actually, oops. I just bumped that really hard and everything is still in place. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna glue these 2 pieces together. Okay, so we've got some reinforcement. So we'll go ahead and do that. Get it out to the sides there. There we go. Okay. Get these 2 pieces glued together. Just run your finger along the edge and make sure everything is nice and lined up. Okay. And then we're going to, now you may want to wait for this, for the putty inside there to dry. The full dry time is about an hour, but I'm not really bumping it or anything, so it should stay in place. And for the sake of the tutorial, I just want to try to show you all this and get it done. And what we're going to do is just slide that around, make sure it's underneath the light switch, and just push that down until it gets a good hold. And just run your finger across the edge there. Make sure that you've got that nice and in place. Okay, and then finally, once that's dry, you're going to take this last piece, and the tip of this little triangular piece here should just barely touch the circle there in the middle. That's how you know you've got it in the right spot. So I'm just going to go ahead and put glue on this piece, and I'm going to go ahead and glue that down. Okay. And then finally, we've got this piece here, okay, and that is going to get glued on back here to cover up that little hole back there where the cord's coming out, okay. So there's your base, okay, and that's actually pretty sturdy already. So let me go ahead, let me plug this guy in. Okay, let me plug him in, turn him on. Let's pop this guy. You can hear metal on metal. And let's watch her spin. Now, as you can see, it's finding its center point of balance. A little bit of heat is building up. Now, if you take a look and just put your head over the top of it, just try to make sure that everything is nice and centered and balanced. Now, actually, with this one, I think I might have even done a better job than I did with the prototype that we shot for the video. So if you notice that it starts to spin and then it stops a little bit, just kind of nudge it a little bit and adjust it. As you move the lamp, it will actually move the harp, okay? And do your best to make sure that that is angled and pointing straight up. Okay, and then that should hopefully get this thing spinning for us. So there you have it. It's a beautiful piece, and you can tell that it's going to spin well if it spins at a consistent velocity. If you notice that it's speeding up or slowing down or hesitating or anything, again, just check and make sure that it's nice and balanced and that the tip of that pen is nice and aiming right up at the sky, as centered as possible. Also, check the inside there and just make sure that your little acorn washer doesn't have any debris or anything obstructing the smooth flow. Make sure there's nothing along the actual pen tip that would be obstructing anything. And aside from that, again, just making sure that this thing is nice and centered is really the key. So let's turn this back on and put that right over again and get it started. And once the heat builds up in there, when you put that lampshade on, it should sort of just start going right away. And another thing that I've noticed is with these flaps here, if you bring them lower, it tends to spin a little bit faster. And if you raise them higher, it tends to spin a little bit slower. So you can actually, impact the speed at which this thing spins based on the sails or the little flaps there. And as you can see, that thing is in fact moving a little bit faster. But just be sure that you don't use anything more than a 60-watt light bulb. I had this thing operating for literally 72 hours in my bedroom. And although we advise not to leave it unattended, I did because I wanted to risk burning down my house to make sure that this was okay for you guys to do at home as well. And again, even leaving this thing on forever, yeah, it's warm, but I would say it's no more than, maybe 80 degrees roughly, I guess, if I was to touch this. So I don't think you really need to worry about anything starting on fire. If you're concerned about that, you can not let it spin and you can just put an LED light bulb in there and it still makes a great little lamp. But if you do want the spinny effect, you will need to generate some heat. And of course, again, if someone knocks it over, it could be a hazard. So never leave it unattended. But it's a beautiful piece and it's very mesmerizing, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it.